If you're looking forward to the Spider-Verse, let me tell you, there's more out there, actually. Aranya and Spider-Man 2099 Dark Tomorrow is available right now from Disney Books and Marvel. And this guy's a name you're definitely going to know, not just from the Spider-Verse, but other stuff as well. Alex Segura. Alex, how you doing, man?
Good, man. Thanks so much for having me.
So I was saying this isn't your first time entering the Spider-Verse. You were a contributor to Edge of the Spider-Verse for Marvel Comics last year. So how much fun is it to tell stories in this world and continue to explore the world beyond Peter Parker?
Yeah, that was so wild because I had already turned in the novel at that point. I think it had maybe been announced, but Spider editor Nick Lowe reached out and he was like, "Hey, would you want to write Aranya in the comics?" So it was a nice bookend because the Edge of Spider-Verse story is very much kind of reestablishing Anya Corazon as Aranya. She pivots from the Spider-Girl identity to Araña, and the novel is, while in a different quote unquote continuity, it really shows you Aranya's early days and how she's figuring out how to be a superhero. And, in stark contrast to Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, who has basically given up being Spider-Man. But it's I grew up on Spider-Man. My first superhero comic was a Spider-Man comic, a reprint of an old Stan Lee Romita story in digest form that my grandparents picked up for me at a grocery store. And so, that's always been my touchstone. Whatever else I'm reading comics wise, I'm always like at least keeping up with Spider-Man. So it's been nice to see this explosion of spider heroes and characters and just the diversity in more than just like identity, just like diversity of content and styles. It's been really fun.
It really is, man. And Spider-Man's a strong story on its own, but these are also very visual characters, as you know. So
Mhm.
talk about kind of telling these stories without an artist and having to bring those images to life in those vivid descriptions that you have.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I'm not going to lie. I think one of the best parts about excuse me, about comics is the collaborative side. You kind of tee up the artist and then sit back and watch them do these amazing things visually and create kind of complete your sentences. You're jamming together almost in a musical way. So, and novels are much more internal and you're literally in the heads of these characters. So it was nice in that regard that I got to spend some time in Miguel's head and Anya's, psyche, and kind of seeing what really drives them beyond like the captions you would see on a comic book. But I took it to be more of like a contract with the reader as opposed to the artist, where you're kind of giving the reader enough to visualize the story in their head. So I'm not an over describer in my prose. Like I don't think you need to know like what color shoelaces the person has, or like it's got to be relevant. So I tried to give enough detail so the reader could paint the picture in their mind and then leave it at that. So just so it's an engaged kind of fun page turner.
I think you definitely did that. So you
No, thanks.
definitely accomplished that for sure. Now,
Good.
a lot of fans know Spider-Man 29 and on, but not many of them necessarily know Aranya. So going into the story, how much backstory did you actually feel like you needed to provide, especially early on for her?
I was really trying to strike a balance between kind of keeping the fans that are familiar with these characters fed and excited and interested in terms of like Easter eggs or nods to the past, or not too much Wikipediaing, I guess, not too much background dumps, but I also knew that this was an opportunity for casual readers or casual fans who have maybe watched the movies and are interested in more Spider-Verse type adventures to come in. So I wove in the history where it was relevant. I didn't over-explain or spend pages and pages giving background on what every crossover meant, and I had very specific points in continuity. So if you're like reading it and you're a fan of the comics, you can kind of figure out where these fit in. It is its own continuity, but it's also, if you squint, it fits into what's happened before.
There's winks and nods there, which I do
Yeah.
love that you did for sure. What grabbed me though, Alex, was though that vibe wise and attitude wise, Aranya is very much a Spider-Man character. She's very much a Spider-Man hero. What's your favorite thing about her?
I love how driven she is. I think that, most people would fold in her situation where you're given these powers and then left like high and dry. Like, obviously Peter Parker did not have a mentor, but he had a great foundation in Uncle Ben and Aunt May and was the initial spider hero. But Anya is granted these powers in very unsettling ways, and she has this mentor in Miguel, not Miguel O'Hara, but another Miguel, which was a little challenging to write. But her mentor, not to spoil anything, but is disappears or goes away, and she's left stranded. And so I really admire her ability to kind of just pick herself up and keep going and learn on the go and not be afraid and not just kind of give up, which I think a lot of people would do in these under these circumstances.
Especially at that age too. So yeah, you really brought that
Yeah.
out very, very well.
Oh,
I want to go
thanks.
back. I want to go back to Spider-Man 2099 for a minute because he's always been a fan favorite, but not quite to the level of Peter or Miles have been over the years. So with this book and also Across the Spider-Verse, which we kind of touched on a few minutes ago, do you feel like
Mhm.
this kind of shines a very well-deserved spotlight on Miguel that he's yet to receive until right pretty much right now?
Yeah, I think so. It's really a great moment for the character, being such an integral part in the film. And, Marvel Comics are publishing some new great Spider-Man 2099 comics by Steve Orlando and some great artists. But for me, the idea of a Latinx Spider-Man, like actually Spider-Man from the future, was such a game changer as a reader and as a Cuban American kid. Just identifying in that way, it felt really important at the time, and in retrospect still feels important. So to be able to kind of shepherd this, his debut novel, I guess, starring role in a novel, and at such a cool moment for his history, it was really an honor. And I love the character. I think he's such an interesting flip on the classic Spider-Man trope, where he's not glib and making jokes as Spider-Man, but actually he's doing it as Miguel, and as Spider-Man he's kind of this dark Avenger type. um, and I think there's a lot of tragedy and conflict in him. And I think if you're a new reader, you think that the status quo I'm explaining is just new to the novel, but it's actually a very specific point in Spider-Man 2099's continuity that I found particularly fascinating, where he's kind of reeling from these major losses and has just been granted this new role as CEO of Alchemax, which is a very huge megacorp, which
Mhm.
I think we're all familiar with, but that has its fingers in every aspect of society in the future. And so he was fun to play with, and it was really my favorite part of the book is the contrast between the two characters and what kind of brings them together to then execute the more superhero style adventure.
You just kind of led me right in to my next question,
Good.
actually, because getting these two characters together was really fun. And but it's not just fun, but there's depth there as well. So no spoilers, of course, but
Mhm.
talk a little bit about the common bonds that bring Anya and Miguel together, because I actually thought it was really special.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think that was to me the core of what interested me in the novel. Like, obviously, there's the fun Easter eggs. Like, I'm still amazed that I got to use the villain I got to use. It was like it felt like such a fun deep cut. But also, what really interested me as a writer was the dynamic between this really new superhero and this established, more grumpy and basically resigned superhero. Like, it's not a spoiler to say that when you see Miguel for the first time, he's given up being Spider-Man, and Anya is blasted by this ancient artifact's energy that sends her into the future. But the problem is her powers are on the fritz. But her first thought is, let me find the Spider-Man of this time. Like, she knows that there's a Spider-Man in the future, but the Spider-Man she finds is very different from the Peter Parker Spider-Man she's familiar with. And I think their journey from opposite ends of the spectrum to coming together and deciding and learning from each other and then going off in their own directions, which doesn't spoil anything, but that to me is the crux of the novel. Like, what do they gain from each other, and how does that change them?
No doubt about that. I do want to talk about the villain for a second. I know it's going to be really hard to talk about without spoiling anything, but how do you go into this, Alex, and kind of give your take on this villain for this Dark Tomorrow story? How do you take a villain like the one that you have and give it a little bit of your own twist to make it special?
um we can just say who it is if you don't mind. Like,
No, you go. This is
yeah,
your
okay,
novel,
yeah.
dude.
Yeah. So the big bad, or at least the big bad one of two, is Judas Traveler, who, if you're a hardcore Spidey fan, was a big player in the early days of the Clone Saga. Like, he shows up at Ravencroft, yeah, the kind of Arkham type asylum in the Spider Verse, and is a big player, and he has ties to the Screers and all the other kind of early Clone Saga people. And I've always been fascinated by the character's look and almost invincibility and kind of ability to create illusions and trick you into thinking he is much more powerful than he really is. It's almost like a mastermind type villain. And I thought his look was really cool. Um, but he hadn't really been used in a while. Like, I think he popped up here and there. So my perspective on him was, and the same with Anya and Miguel, is to use the prime version of the character, like the iteration that I felt was the most evocative to me as a reader. And that's kind of where my imprint shows. Like, I was most interested in talking about Anya's early days because those are the formative times for her. And in Miguel, I was really fascinated by that dark moment where he's kind of questioning whether he should even be Spider-Man. And for a traveler, it was, what does this all-powerful being do if he's like basically vamping. He's not really as powerful as he seems, but he wants to awaken this bigger, darker evil to actually tap into that power. So that was interesting to me, and kind of throwing them all together felt like a fun adventure.
No doubt about that. And credit for you for digging deep for that villain too. That's
Oh,
that's
thanks. Yeah.
that's always fun. That's always fun for me. Now, what do you think the future is for a character like Aranya though? Do you have more stories to tell in your head? Could you see more of her in the comics as well coming up in the future? Is this just the beginning for her?
I think she's always in play. I think she's such a big part of the Spider-Verse, and I think hopefully we'll see more of her. I have a ton of stories I would tell with the character. I would love to write more Miguel stories. I have really loved those characters, and I think the novel definitely, without spoiling anything, teased things up where there could be more after that.
That's why I asked. So that's the fingers crossed that that's
Good
going to be the
question.
case.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, Alex, you've written some incredible stories and characters in your career. The Spider Verse. You talk about the Poe Dameron books that you did for Star in the Star Wars universe. Is there a character you still haven't checked off that list yet in your mind? Like I gotta write this character at some point.
Huh. Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch. I mean, I love the X-Men. I love Daredevil. I love Batman. I'm a big Trek guy. I mean, I love Star Wars, but there's obviously different eras of Star Wars. Like I love Obi-Wan. I think he's a really fascinating character. I think there's a great YA novel in there somewhere. Um, yeah, and obviously Peter Parker, the Prime Spider-Man as well, is a favorite of mine. Just like basically obsessed with his entire story. So yeah, there's always, and I got the chance to write a question story for DC, which was a thrill. So, you just keep doing what you're doing and hope that you get these opportunities and be grateful for them.
If we can tee Alex up for an Obi-Wan story, that'd be great for anybody that happens to be listening that can make that happen. Let's do that because I'd be
Thanks.
on board for that for sure. Right now,
Yeah.
you got to check out Aranya and Spider-Man 29 Dark Tomorrow, which is available now wherever books are sold from Marvel and Disney Books. Pick this one up. You're going to love it. This guy, Alex Segura, thank you so much, man, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. This was fun.